Welcome, Mama, to the Postpartum Coach Podcast. Finally, a podcast dedicated just to the mental and emotional world of us postpartum women. I am your friend, fellow mama, and postpartum life coach, Lizzie Langston. After intense birth trauma, delivering my first child, and really scary mental health crises following the birth of my second and third baby, I set off on a 6-year journey to understand postpartum mental health from the inside out. On this podcast, I bring you, as a mom of 4 and a certified postpartum life coach, the tools you need to avoid mental health crashes, to get out of the postpartum rut, and to embrace a vivacious motherhood that you love from the inside out. Let's get you feeling like yourself again, Mama, and welcome to the Postpartum Coach Podcast. Hi, my loves. I am happy, content, and exhausted. I am premenstrual, and it is the summertime. The heat, as the globe is warming, unfortunately, the heat is getting way too intense down here. I'm in Phoenix, Mesa. And so I'm curious if you guys have felt differences in the weather. And gosh, the earliest, strongest hurricane headed to the Caribbean. What's happening? There's actually a really good documentary that will break your heart, but also wake you up and really help you have a more full picture of the global warming climate change issue. And it is called Before the Flood. And I don't know if you knew this, but the ambassador of peace for climate change in the United Nations is actually Leonardo DiCaprio. And you get to know, like, at first you're like, what? How does that make sense? But you get to know more of his qualifications, his background, and really his heart for this particular issue. So anyway, it was very eye-opening, very glad I watched it. I actually have watched like 3/4 of it. So highly recommend Before the Flood. It's on actually Disney Plus. So it's on Disney Plus, the National Geographic section, I think. Yeah, so today's episode is actually going to be something that came to me when I was writing my book. And can I just take a pause, though, before I dive into this topic of unconditional love? I just have to say that I have been going through some really terrible, hard things, and they have nothing to do with my partner. And I'm not going to share details. And also, it's been really tragic and devastating and hard to understand. It's been very, like my friend that I talked to about it all today, she said that my point of orientation in my life has very much changed. And so when that happens, when you have a paradigm shift where you see something so differently, your whole nervous system buckles and you can go into this shockwave. So I've been taking a lot of time for myself. And in that time, the beautiful part about that set of events and writing a book for postpartum women is that it opens up a lot of quiet, contemplative time to be working on this book. And one thing I wanted to speak of particularly is this updating to our operational software as humans that is happening, and that happens, it can happen postpartum, which is a lot of times our postpartum challenges, whether it's lack of energy, health issues, physical recovery from a C-section, NICU baby, depression, anxiety, panic attacks, breastfeeding issues, surgeries that need to be had, or how about all of the other crises that happen that are nothing to do with postpartum that don't just stop just because someone just had a baby, like losing a job, needing to move, financial challenges. So whatever it is, a lot of times it's like all of the above or 2 out of 3. So whatever you particularly are struggling with, or maybe did struggle with back when you were postpartum. A lot of people listen to this podcast to get retroactive healing, or maybe this is just good to keep in mind as you go into your postpartum if you are pregnant. What I've noticed is that the thing about postpartum is the intensity of the darkness or the struggle can be so great and so penetrating, meaning it's not just hard circumstantially. It's like your emotions are hard and then your thoughts are difficult because they're dark and they're scary and the things outside of you are going poorly. So I'd like to shed just a touch of light on why that happens. But really what I want to say is that this can push you into a very simple choice. And you might not see it this way right now. And so I kind of want to frame it this way for you, and then we can talk about it. Because I've worked with a lot of women over the years. I've been doing this for like almost 6 years now, coaching postpartum women only. Occasionally, someone hires me for like something else, but not usually. And so what I see is that women are backed into a corner where everything that they normally can use to get themselves out of some sort of a rut or a challenging time or a stuck or stagnant time or a heavy time, all their typical things are not working. And they're scared, understandably. And the way that fear manifests, actually, it's not the way that fear manifests, it's the way that they respond to their own feeling of total, utter, vulnerable fear to a new extent that they've never really reached before. And it's very scary. What I've noticed is all of us, because I did this too, when we're at that point and we're backed into that corner, our meanest selves come out. Our meanest selves, the mean, harsh voice that believes that if we just beat ourselves down hard enough, that we will perform better, that we will grow stronger, we will turn around and fix it, we will finally get ourselves out of this. How many of us, and I'm not shaming this perspective, I grew up with this too. So just think to yourself, is there a part of you, even if you intellectually are like, oh, I know that's probably not the best, is there a part of you that says, yeah, definitely, I am my hardest critic? Yes, definitely. I criticize myself. I say things to myself I would never say to any of my close friends ever. And yet you just say them to yourself. So this is the operating system of fear. So it's not that you feel fear. Feeling fear is not the problem. It's not a problem. It's that you try to fix the fear from a fear-based response approach. So your response to your own deep fear and vulnerability because of your mental health challenges or because of how torn apart your body feels post-delivery or whatever it is, there's fear and vulnerability in there. It's so scary. You've never felt that vulnerable and scared. And that is when the slammer voice comes in. The Judge Judy, but it's like meaner than Judge Judy. It is a toxic voice. Have you ever encountered this voice? Can you relate? Can you think about what I'm talking about? Those of us who are maybe a little farther along in our journeys, maybe we have a better hold on this voice. I find that it is first-time moms, second-time moms, maybe even third-time moms, or I don't know. I don't know what the factors are. Maybe it's how many kids you've had. Maybe it's how old you are. Maybe it's the way you were raised. Definitely, I think this is a huge part of it. If you came from a family where love and affection were withheld or minimized when you didn't do what was asked, you didn't do what was expected, or you just didn't do what your parent or guardian wanted you to do or thought you should do, if that is the type of dependent love, the conditional love you grew up with, then here's what actually happens. When we are backed into a corner in our lives, when we're in something that's more challenging than we've ever been in, we default to responding to it all with that mean voice. We actually, in our time of most need and confusion and disorientation and everything, when our world is just spinning and we can't find ourselves in it, we go to the mean voice. We go to the voice of those in our lives who would push us harder. And, the reasons that we do this are varied. And some people kind of have pride in this, like, oh, I'm a competitive athlete. I mean, or not. Maybe you don't have pride in it. But the reasons we do this could be varied, right? They can be because love was withdrawn. They can be but at the end of the day, we learn that, or like the message we take away from this sort of emotional template is that fear, threats, a punishment awaiting us, that works better than love. And I'm going to be honest with you, fear does work. Fear does work. It just also does damage to a relationship. Because who we really are and what we really deserve is love and only love. And deep down in our bodies, we know that. Our bodies know that from the moment we're born, the moment we take a breath. This is why trauma from childhood even exists for people. It's because when you didn't receive unconditional love, that hurt you because that's what we're made for. That's who we are at our best. So going back to the topic of today, that postpartum, the intensity and the challenge that some women experience in this time, in this season of their lives, it can actually be a chance to change the voice in your head for good. Yes, it's possible. So if you are somebody who has been living with a really mean, really chaotic, very judgy, and literally like it's almost like the devil's, I don't really believe in the devil, but if you imagine like the devil, the prototype or the archetype of like the devil, that's this voice in our head. And one could say maybe that it's well-intentioned. It's trying to help us fix or change or perform or improve ourselves. But we have totally forgotten. I had in my life totally forgotten what unconditional love even felt like. I actually don't think that I really experienced unconditional love until I found life coaching. Isn't that crazy? When I found life coaching, I remember working with coaches and stuff. I remember just hearing this phrase like, you are worthy. Just for being a human, you are completely worthy. You always will be. Like there's nothing you could do that could separate you from your inherent worthiness as a human being. Worthiness to exist, worthiness to be alive, worthiness to be here right now. Anyway, so I don't need to go into like my personal journey necessarily with all this because everybody's journeys are nuanced and different, but I wanted to read you a few things that I wrote for my book on this topic, and hopefully that will do the talking for me because I feel like I'm a little bit rambly tonight. Okay, so got my notebook in front of me because I've been writing it all in a notebook. And by the way, this is like not edited yet, so, but it is good, I think. We are running on the same patterns and programming that we adopted to survive. If you were raised with conditional love, meaning affection or nurturing or support was withdrawn from you if you didn't do what your guardians wanted, then you are at higher risk for anxiety and depression postpartum. That's actually true. If you have trauma, side note, if you have trauma, childhood trauma, studies have shown that you are more likely to experience anxiety and depression in your adulthood. I am so sick in my heart for all the moms out there who are suffering. Here's the question. If you know you were raised with conditional love, then you are probably treating yourself with conditional love right now. Conditional meaning the love can be taken away if you don't like what you're looking at, if you don't like the behavior or what's happening. So we treat ourselves with conditional love because we had to perform. We talk to ourselves mean because we had to perform or be who our parents or guardians or whoever else in our lives needed us to be in order to get the love and the care and the basic needs, emotional needs we needed, or physical needs. Unconditional love heals absolutely everything. The thing is, most of us have never really experienced it in its fullness. Unwittingly, many of our earliest relationships didn't even expose us to it, so we've never known it. The people we grew up with may have put conditions to love expressed, not because they didn't love us, but because they didn't have better tools that more fully respected your inherent worthiness and that more fully reflected back to you your inherent goodness, no matter what your behaviors or choices were. So it's not because they didn't love you, it's because they didn't have better tools. The absence of love is essentially fear. Conditional love creates people-pleasing performers, which almost every woman has been at one point in her life. And just a little side note here, can you think about, are you doing any people-pleasing, including just withholding your needs, not wanting to be a burden, making light of things that are actually scaring you, waiting it out, holding your breath? That is all essentially lying. It's not being real. You don't feel safe to have actual full connection. And that's so sad. And that comes from a fear of not being loved as you are. The thing with unconditional love is we push it away. Gabby Bernstein, in her best-selling book, The Universe Has Your Back, tells us that we are love resistant. Most of us are not comfortable being with unconditional love. We don't know how to respond to it when people want to give it to us, how to receive it, or just be in a room with someone who's holding its pure presence. Have you ever felt total acceptance wash over you? Like a gentle waterfall, growing brighter and bigger and warmer? Have you ever experienced this? And then, even if someone shows it to us or we get exposed to it, we may actually do something to push that person or that love away. Logically, we think we want unconditional love. Intellectually, we do want unconditional love. But the thing is, we don't trust it. We don't trust that we can actually make change with love because we don't have much experience with it. We trust fear and that we will make change from fear and meanness and criticism and pushing ourselves harder. We trust fear like this so much because it's what's familiar to us. It's the world we grew up in, most of us. Our parents and the people who raised us are good people. Maybe they've accomplished a lot and they used threats, or they were hard on themselves and you witnessed that. Or maybe they took things away from you or isolated you when you had big emotions or big needs. We think to ourselves, but if I give myself unconditional love, then I'll take advantage of it and not do anything. I'll let myself get away with it. I won't change. It is here we have our actual lie. The truth is, fear works. It's just that we deserve love and we want love and we operate the very best from love. We expand more fully, work harder, play harder, have more creativity and joy. When we work from fear and punishment, we don't access creativity quite the same way. Sure, we can come up with an idea to get the grade, but we don't reach into the clear quality of the heavens. We cannot hear our spiritual gifts as dominantly. The intellectual mind kicks in more when fear is in the operating system. Notice it isn't unconditional love we don't trust. It is us we don't trust. Or maybe it's both. Here is an idea. Maybe the lack of trust that we have with being kind and loving and forgiving and graceful and unconditionally loving to ourselves. Maybe this lack of trust isn't that we don't trust unconditional love, but it's that we actually just believe that we shouldn't be trusted and that we just aren't trustworthy and that we are bad deep down. I think our deepest fear is that we would not rise to the occasion, that we cannot operate with love. Not because love doesn't work, but because we don't work, that we are inherently not made for love. And this is actually the original sin. This is actually a lie. This idea that we are bad is actually a survival technique in family groups, specifically with children. When our mind is developing, it is a way that we conserve energy. Okay, I'm going to pause here because the rest of it kind of goes into like this different survival mode. And it feels really vulnerable to share this with you. But yeah, main takeaways from this topic is that the beautiful medicine, the spiritual medicine that postpartum can give us, because it can be so intense, because we can feel so vulnerable, is that it pushes us to our limits. And if we are operating from fear, you will just implode. Not like physically, but if you constantly tear yourself down and you are trying to, quote, fix yourself, and you are so frustrated and confused and you're annoyed and like those emotions towards yourself because you're not performing better, because you can't get your act together, because you can't pray it away, because you're not being spiritual enough, you're not working hard enough, you're not calling enough doctors, you're not doing it holistic enough, you're not whatever, like somehow it's your fault. And that the reason you're feeling this way is because of you, because you're deficient in some way. That is the voice of fear. And I want to invite you to remember right now in this day, and your whole life can change right this moment, that behind that loud voice of fear, it's very fast-paced, it's very hot, there is a cool voice of peace and acceptance and softness. It lives in the body, this other voice, okay? So the fear lives in the mind. I mean, technically all the emotions are all over the body, but you'll hear the fear the loudest in your mind. And I want you to remember that you don't actually have to get caught up in the shitstorm that is that mean voice in your head. That you can pretend that that is literally like a hailstorm happening outside of the pool. And then you just take a breath and you descend under the water and you're safe. You're safe from the storm. The wind can't get you. The cold, you're covered. And that's exactly what you can do. You can go into the body. You can retreat from the mind. Take some breaths. Feel your tummy rising and falling, your chest rising and falling. Hear the sounds of the birds outside. Feel and hear the air coming up through your nostrils. You can actually get lost in sensation and senses, not words. You can get out of the words and get into the body, and it is a refuge. And you will feel better, and you will have a reset. That voice might still be chit-chatting when you go back up to it, but you'll hear it differently. You'll experience it differently. You will be different because of the peace that's available to you in your body. And that's what I love about being the postpartum coach, is I love being the one that gets to show women, sometimes for the first time, how to use their body as a refuge, how to remember that it is not what has betrayed you. The anxiety, the depressiveness, or whatever else that your body's done that whether it's miscarriage or, if you're blaming your body, that is just another version of fear that you are wrong, and thinking that you are the problem. We do that as little children because we are dependent on all of the people. And so we can't just say, oh, my parents are actually really bad when we're 5 years old and run away from them, because we wouldn't have our needs met. So we don't actually use the calories to do that sort of paradigm shifting until we're older. And some of us just carry that child that thinks everything that's wrong in the world is because of her. That's how she makes sense of her world. Sometimes that part in us comes out postpartum. So just remember, actually, the system that you're living in for postpartum women has dropped the freaking ball. Like, there is so much support that women need after a C-section that is not covered by insurance for most women, and also not really talked about very much. So anyway, there's other factors, not just the system. There's so many things we could talk about. So remember, you operate best from unconditional love. Try it. Try to find that voice in your head. If you need help, come talk to me. Book a consultation, LizzieLangston.com/consult. You can also email me. I'm just Lizzie, that's Lizzie, at Lizzie Langston, LANGSTON.com. Lizzie at LizzieLangston.com. Email me. And you guys know there's tons of free resources on my website. That's LizzieLangston.com. All right, we'll talk to you next week, loves.
Hey, Lizzie here. I've helped dozens of postpartum moms just like you to manage their postpartum anxiety and deconstruct their postpartum depression. It's really easy for me. So if you're ready to feel better, I know the way. Let's chat on the phone. Set up a time by going to LizzieLangston.com/consult. It's pretty simple, and I will be calling you soon.